Joining me now on the Knicks Film School podcast, another first-time guest. We've been having a lot of first-time guests recently, which I'm happy about because it means we continue to spread our wings and get some new and interesting voices in here, and continue to do one of my favorite things, which is to talk about other NBA teams. And when we can talk about the plight of other NBA teams, obviously, as Knicks fans, I mean, just give me all of it. Of course, plight is a relative term, considering the team that we're going to talk about today won more games than anybody in the NBA last season. There still might be some plight. We'll get into it. He is one of the hosts, of course, of the Timeline Pod, one of the absolute best NBA pods you will find out there, part of the BlueWire podcast family. Sam Cooper, what's going on, my man?
Hey, John. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a tough offseason, and we've been the subject of a lot of jokes, but we're getting through it. There's only a few weeks left. I think we're chilling for now. It's a better time to be a Suns fan the past couple of weeks.
So I have to start there. People already know we're trying to pawn off Julius Randle on any team we can this week. That is this week. Yep. We've done it in past weeks. We'll get to it soon. I'm just fascinated to know what it feels like to, in the span of, I guess, 2 years. I mean, I guess we could go back a little bit more than that, but to go from one of the 5 teams in the league that is consistently laughed at the most, along with present company. Who else we've thrown in there? The Wolves, the Cavs, even though obviously they won a title, but like the Cavs feel like they should be in there because of their owner and whatnot, even though they're certainly not there anymore. Maybe you want to throw the Wizards in there. I don't know. Whatever. We're in that group. You guys were in that group. Mm-hmm. In 2 years, you've gone from that to like, we need to talk up a bad offseason after we just led the league in wins and lost a 7-game series to a guy who I, as Andrew well knows, personally think is maybe the best player on the planet. What's that like, that journey?
It's at the start incredibly exhilarating. Obviously, I mean, I've had so much fun covering the team in the past 2 seasons. And so I try to retain, like, to some extent, a little bit of that as I think about like the failures and game 7. But then, yeah, man, the flip side of it, that game 7, I've tried not to go easy on these guys because it's like, you know, let's just call it like it is, one of the most embarrassing losses in NBA history and sports history, arguably, in the playoffs, to go out that way. And I think they basically deserve all the flack they've received, both from internally and from, you know, the national media for the past few months. It's been tough now because we have to recenter ourselves and pivot essentially to something else if you want to get over the last obstacle. And for 8 or 10 weeks, that was KD. Now we're in kind of what, you know, the section of the offseason that I would call post KD clarity. We can kind of like, we've moved past it. We can kind of think it was fun while it lasted, but we can kind of think about the basketball again. And look, here's the honest truth. They're still a really good basketball team. They could still win a hell of a lot of games this season. It just takes some bite out of it, though, when you know that like, no matter how many, my partner Mike made a great point the other day, no matter how many games the Suns win this season, Suns fans aren't going to be having a lot of fun if it's the exact same roster going into the playoffs. There's just not that belief anymore. And there's not going to be that belief from other fan bases, from members of the national media either. So that's kind of how we got to the situation we're in today. There has to be some level of change. As fun as it's been, and as fun as it could continue to be to watch guys like Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, etc.
There's a part of me that, like, the gut instinct is to be like, the nerve of you, how dare you be like, we need change. And then I think back to a decade ago. And again, Andrew knows this very well. There wasn't a long time between, I mean, I guess it was 4 years, right? Between Isaiah and the 12-13 team that was like super fun and then petered out against the Pacers in the second round of the playoffs. And then like, everybody was bitching and moaning between that offseason between that season and the next offseason, which is when the Bogdanovic trade happened, which was obviously a disaster in the moment. But like, that's why I can't go to you and be like, you know, how dare the nerve of you? Because when you get to where you get to, you're there. And it's like, the NBA is not, it's unforgiving. It's like, you don't get, I mean, as I'm sure God knows you've talked about probably ad nauseum, you don't get a certain amount of time. You have to make do with the time you have. So I don't blame you one bit for having the attitude you have.
I mean, we're kind of in such a special era of the NBA right now where it's not like it was 6 or 7 years ago. You go into each season actually believing that there's a group of 6 to 8 contenders that you can really, truly believe in. We couldn't say that at the height of the Golden State dynasty.
There was one contender that you.
There was one contending team, right? So if you're, but right now, the past couple seasons, the Suns have been right in that group. And if you're in that group, takes a hell of a lot of work to get there. But if you're in that group and then you're the general manager of one of those teams and you're not exhausting every possible effort, every possible asset and resource to push yourself over the top. The reason a lot of Suns fans are frustrated right now is because we already did the internal development thing last year after the Bucks. That was already the message, the selling point after the loss to the Bucks as well. These guys are young. They'll get better. It'll be fine. And then they won a lot of games and ultimately flamed out. And it's just, you can't sell people on the same exact message 2 years in a row, which to their credit, they did try to go after Kevin Durant. So I don't think that was their intention to do nothing this offseason. But lo and behold, it's September 8th. They've essentially done nothing this offseason. And now we got to talk about other options, of which I think there are some interesting ones.
So again, we come up with these little, I can't even make that joke. We did not put Sam up to this, but I was about to say, we come up with these little ploys to get people to subscribe to the YouTube or watch the pod on the Knicks Film School YouTube channel. This might be the best one yet. Sam Cooper showing up in a Julius Randle, the City Edition jersey from not this past season, but from the season before, which I quite like. Evidently you like it too.
It's an omen. It's a good omen. That's the goal. Is we're trying rehabilitation is the theme here, and we're going to see what we can get out of him.
We're going to get to Randle very shortly. I do just want to so for anybody who may not be as in tune with the Suns' doings, what has happened, if anything, between the aforementioned Game 7 disaster and today? Is the roster the same, or where are we at?
The roster is effectively the same in terms of if you look at the top 7 or 8 guys.
Okay.
They kept DeAndre Ayton. DeAndre Ayton was an Indiana Pacer for about 6 hours, if you guys remember that.
Was it that long?
So something like that. I think it was less than 24 hours in any case. Yeah. So that was fun, but he's back. He seems motivated. I'm not especially worried about his standing with the team. I would say that there are other players on the team whom I think you could describe as a little bit disgruntled. Jae Crowder being one of them. There's kind of a battle going on right now. It seems like the Suns are leaning towards Cam Johnson, who is also extension eligible, by the way, coming off his rookie deal. It seems like he's going to be the starting power forward. That's not announced yet, but the tea leaves are pointing to that. And Jae Crowder might have something to say about that, which could also potentially influence some of their decisions here in the final weeks of the offseason or up until the trade deadline. But besides that, it's minor moves, veteran minimum signings, guys to come off the bench, Jock Landale, Josh Okogie, Damian Lee, no one really to write home about. But these are depth pieces who are supposed to supplement a Kevin Durant addition. And outside of that, they're not worth really talking about.
No offense against them, but yeah, I would not disagree with that. Yeah. That was the next question I was going to ask you before we get to Randle, is the Crowder thing. It feels like there hasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, has there been any firm reporting on the Crowder thing, or it just seems like a lot of noise from nowhere in particular? Is that fair to?
It's a lot of noise from nowhere in particular, but I mean, take the guy's word for it is the biggest thing, because it's information coming from Jay himself. He's kind of had this social media war of attrition going on for a couple months now, where he's posting photos with the Suns logo cropped out. He's liking comments from other people saying, he's liking comments from other people saying, hey, come play for the Heat, come play for Dallas, even was one of them. So he's mad. And, I think you could argue is that all sort of just drama, and, these guys will get back to training camp and he'll be fine. Maybe there is an argument to say that. From his perspective, I try to understand the NBA player perspective, and there's a lot of money on the table for Jae Crowder coming up, where he's kind of in this perfect tier of 3-and-D NBA role player, who the type of guy who earns a mid-level contract extension.
I was about to say it's mid-level money, right?
It's where mid-level money.
I want to say
he starts.
If you ask me, gun to my head right now, is he 33? I'm looking it up right. He's 32. He just turned 32. So I aged him a little bit. So he's but he feels like an old 32. It feels like he's been around for a while.
And he's kind of just in that archetype in the NBA, right? Where like the 32-year-olds who still start, they make mid-level money. The 32-year-old 3-and-D wings who don't start, who get 10 or 15 minutes per game off the bench behind a younger player, like say a Cam Johnson, well, all of a sudden, like you can find yourself making minimum money pretty quickly. And so I think that's really all it is about for Jae. It's about maybe he doesn't believe in the vision anymore. Maybe he doesn't truly believe this is a championship team, but mostly it's about the money. And, you know, I think the Suns will eventually honor whatever request is coming from his camp, whether that be in a Julius Randle trade, which we could talk about, or whatever else. It'll come eventually. And
so I'm also just remembering that, like, once upon a time, remember when Jae Crowder was on was it like a 4 for $24 million? He was pegged as like one of the most underpaid players in the NBA before he signed, I think it was this current contract. So like I could see, to your point, money probably does make a lot, mean a lot to this guy. And he's an expiring contract. Before we get to the Randle fit potentially, sure. And again, I just want to be very clear. I have not seen any substantiated rumors that these two teams have spoken. I will say, I teased this at the end of the pod that I did with the other day. Someone has told me that the Suns and Knicks have spoken about Julius Randle. I don't know to the extent. I don't know if it was like making a phone call, like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And then maybe nothing came. I don't know. I can't speak to that, but that's all I know there. That said, I do think it's a worthy conversation for the reasons that you just talked about a little while ago about like the Suns needing to do something and the Knicks having a Julius Randle potentially a problem on their hands, which we don't need to talk about because we talk about that enough on our show. So just from a salary standpoint, it seems like if a trade was going to be made, it would include some combination of the following 5 players, actually, and I'll just in no particular order. So Crowder would seem to be the most obvious name. Landry Shamet, who I want to get to in a second, has his extension hasn't even kicked in yet. In terms of like he hasn't played his first game on this new contract. Mm-hmm. Saric, those are the 3 guys in the 9 to 10.1 million range. And then actually, no, I was going to say Cameron Payne. I don't think Cameron Payne's because he's your backup point guard, right? He's not going anywhere.
Well, I mean, the way I envisioned it, and I'm sure we don't need all the details right now. I think you don't need to include a Cameron Payne or a smaller piece if you guys are willing to like cut someone off the end of your roster. And I haven't really looked at all that, but you could do a 2-for-1 swap here. That makes sense financially. So the thing is, and the thing that complicates this a little bit is in addition to having a trade bonus, great job on the contract, guys. In addition to having a trade bonus, Julius Randle also has a bonus that gets kicked in if he is traded to a team that made the playoffs last season because of the quirky way that, at least as I understand it, and I've done a lot of research on this. Yeah. Okay. It's kooky. So like his bonuses in his contract are tied 50% to personal accolades, which are obviously not kicking in for next season, but also for making the playoffs. And they are unlikely for the 22-23 season as of today. My understanding is that if he gets traded to a team that made the playoffs last year, those then become likely bonuses and they all of a sudden factor into his cap number, which does complicate trading a little bit, I think. Yeah. I think we could still figure something out, but I'm glad you pointed that out because I did not know that detail. So weird. You can, and that's why the other name I do want to at least mention is Torrey Craig. So Torrey Craig is sitting there, his expiring contract for $5 million. So let's just focus on like it would be some combination of those 4: Crowder, Shamet, Saric, and Craig. Shamet, do the Suns still want? Or are the Suns already having buyer's remorse? Like it's honestly, it's a lesser version of the Randle thing. If you guys are, I guess. Yeah, well, a way lesser version of the Randle thing, I would say. About look, $65 million less. The thing I'll point out just about Shamet is that if you're looking at his contract, you're going to see that 4-year number that he hasn't played any games yet. And that might look a little bit scary. 2 guaranteed, right? It's only 2 guaranteed. Yeah. This is why I know you always come with the details. So I knew you were going to have that. But yeah, it's only 2 guaranteed. If you're really unhappy with the guy, you can boot him at the end of next season. But yes, in general, I think the Suns are probably dissatisfied with the way Landry Shamet has played. On the other hand, they can't be that dissatisfied because they haven't made much of an honest effort to replace him in the backcourt. The Suns backup guards, as of today, September 8th, September 9th, whenever people listen to this, are once again Cameron Payne and Landry Shamet. Two guys who basically failed them in the playoffs, but those are the two best backup guards. So he's still going to get minutes until they trade him.
Yeah, which is interesting. And again, if you're talking about fits between these two teams, we have a backup guard. His name is Derrick Rose. Perhaps the Arizona Sun would do him well. Unfortunately, Derrick Rose is due $14.5 million this season. And then when you throw him into the mix, then I think the trade becomes untenable in terms of the money. So that probably would not be a thing, but I do think the Knicks would be willing potentially to take on some money that they don't particularly want. Jae Crowder seems like a Tom Thibodeau type of guy. Jae Crowder's a good NBA player, I would say. Oh, he's the guy who makes most sense to move because he doesn't want to be here anymore. That's just obvious. So the complicating thing there is if part of, and I'm not saying that this is the whole reason, but if part of the thinking in New York to move on from Julius Randle is to let Obi Toppin, who I don't know how familiar you are with Obi, he's a bit of a fan favorite here, to let him, spread his wings and fly something to the tune of, 25 to 30 minutes a night. Well, I know enough about Jae Crowder to know that if you probably don't want an unhappy Jae Crowder on your team. And again, if you're saying to me that he has an interest in going somewhere where he could play enough minutes to earn that, mid-level exception money this upcoming summer, well, that might complicate things if he comes here and he stays here. Now, of course, the Knicks could flip him, or again, maybe it's a 3-team deal. But assuming Crowder's in there, then you got Shamet. Saric had a cup of coffee under Tibbs already.
That's a good point.
I don't know how well or
he hated his time in Minnesota, for the record. He's talked about how much
talk to us about that, because I don't think I've ever spoken about it.
I don't remember all of the details, truthfully, because this wasn't my reporting or anyone else's. This was back when he was in Minnesota, but he has said it was the worst time of his career. What was that related to Tibbs' coaching specifically? I'm not 100% sure. I think he just wasn't happy with how involved he was in the offense. Okay. But then he came to Phoenix because if we go back a little bit, right, and reframe, Dario was coming off some great seasons in Philly. He was really on the come up when they were making the second round. I remember in particular his sophomore season there was incredible. He was averaging 15 and 7 as a 22-year-old or something. If I throw the numbers out there, he had a lot of weight and a lot of momentum behind him.
He was a buzzy name for more than a hot minute there. Where people was oh, what do they have with this kid? Yeah.
I think it was this guy could be a third or fourth option on a really, really good, maybe contending team. And obviously now no one thinks that, but I think his career has gone through a lot of change from his time in Minnesota to his time in Phoenix. He started playing the center position at a certain point in Phoenix. He did one season for us, basically only at the power forward spot. Then he did one season for us, mostly at the center spot, tore his ACL in the finals. And now he's coming back, and we don't know if he's going to play the 4 or the 5 this year because they kind of have a couple names competing at both positions. Yeah. So it remains to be seen. But I don't know specifically about his relationship with Tibbs, what his feelings would be.
My guess, again, just a guess, would be if these two sides ever really got serious, I would imagine Phoenix would perhaps want Shamet to go back as the money that's not, obviously it's 2 years, but it's not expiring money, with the assumption that they could find that production elsewhere from somewhere, some player. I don't think you're finding that with the Knicks. Maybe there's a 3-team deal out there, but I guess more the part, I think if they agreed that okay, we're the Suns, we want Julius Randle to be a Sun. We believe this will help us in some way. And I don't think the contracts would get in the way. I think they would figure out that part of it. And okay, who's asking for a protected pick and who's sending it? I'm not worried about that as much as I am would the Suns look at Julius Randle and be like, okay, I know we haven't done anything of note. This is a thing that we feel good about doing. And maybe that's just because I'm probably more, I can admit this, I am more down on Julius Randle than probably anyone in the city of New York. Is Andrew not in agreement?
Not just New York. The planet.
Was that a not in agreement? Really? There are a lot of haters in New York. Are you telling me I'm talking to hater number one?
Yes.
Here's the thing. And I just want to say, because like I think some people make this out to be more personal than it is. Like I am actually somewhat offended by the fact that he put forth the effort that he did last season while wearing a jersey that had the city that I've been born and raised in. Like I didn't appreciate that. And then the thumbs down stuff and all that. But just like I've looked at this thing from every angle, I just don't think it makes sense for him here on several different levels. That doesn't mean he's not still a very talented player and can't be a very talented and productive player in the right situation. I just am trying to figure out, is that situation Phoenix? And I'm curious what you see that you think it might be Phoenix.
Well, I can talk about all sorts of on-court things with Julius Randle when I've watched him at his best, of course, and even not necessarily at his best, but let's talk about the average of Julius Randle over the past 2 seasons that I think would make sense for the Suns. Now, I do have a couple of questions for you before we agree on this, and maybe it's a little concerning to me if I'm talking to hater number one out here, but a couple of questions about behavior and effort, because let's be honest, those are the main issues. Just starting from a basketball standpoint, why does Julius Randle make sense on the Suns? Because for the past 2 years, well, here's the truth. The Suns have a major self-creation problem. They have Chris Paul. They have Devin Booker. When Chris Paul and Devin Booker get deep into playoff series, they get trapped around screens. When they get trapped around screens, there are no players in the offense who can bail them out. No other players who can make tough buckets. They've tried to develop DeAndre Ayton in that way. He's made terrific strides defensively in, his 4 seasons in the NBA, but he's not a self-starter on offense. He's just not. He's not an initiator, at least not at this stage. We keep hoping he might be. The same goes for Mikal Bridges. Terrific perimeter defender, not a self-starter offensively. We'd like him to do more of that. Cam Johnson, we'd like him to do more of that. And so the Suns just need another guy. They need another guy who can bail them out in offensive situations. And going into this, let me say this as well. The fact that I've even suggested this, don't think for a second that this has made me the most popular guy in the Suns media sphere. The fact that I'm willing to stick my neck out for Julius Randle, because it is not. Like, this is not necessarily a popular thing I'm suggesting.
We don't do this for brownie points, Sam.
I know. We do it because we truly believe it in our heart of hearts. And,
yes, thank you.
And what I'm going for here is not that Julius needs to be the version of himself he was 2 years ago in New York or a year ago in New York. He just needs to be some mid-tier version of himself who can be the third best player on the Suns, the third best initiator. One example that I give that I've tried to use to talk my partner into this on our podcast is talking about Andrew Wiggins with the Warriors this year. The Warriors spent over $100 million in luxury tax penalties to have Andrew Wiggins on their roster this year. And he turned around. Now, the catalyst was his effort. He was willing to put in the necessary effort to do so, but he had multiple 25 plus point, 12 plus rebound, critically amazing performances in the playoffs. And I think about what the Warriors roster would have looked like if you had just another Jae Crowder as an example in that spot instead of Andrew Wiggins, a guy who doesn't have the necessary upper bound of being able to kind of look, if you squint, like a superstar on certain nights in the playoffs. Would they still have gotten past the Celtics in the finals? Would they still have even gotten to the finals in the first place? I think you could make certain arguments about that. So that's essentially kind of the performance that we're looking for out of Julius. He doesn't have to be first team All NBA, in my opinion.
I want to jump in because you made such a good point. I raise my hand first and foremost in this. As people who talk about and write about this league, specifically this league, not this sport, this league on a regular basis, we get so trapped into pigeonholing. Well, if he's not your first, if he's not your number one, then he's your number two. If he's not your number two, then he doesn't have the ball in his hands as much. And then he's your number three. And then this, and it's like, there's all these archetypes, right? That we set out as like, you have to fit into this such and such box. And the reality is like, should Andrew Wiggins be your primary or secondary? No, he shouldn't be that. But are there times when you just need a guy who has the ability to make a tough bucket to like take the tough mid-ranger? Yeah. Do you want Andrew Wiggins doing that on a regular basis if you're the Warriors? Of course not.
No.
Was it very important that he did that occasionally for them this year? Absolutely. I don't think they win the championship if he doesn't do that. And I think it's a nice luxury to have, which is a great transition to Randle, because again, I think we know now enough to say, like, you don't want Julius Randle to be your number one or your number two.
No.
But man, can the guy make some tough baskets? Yes. And look, 2 years ago, the shot that, I mean, it seemed like he hit 3 or 4 of them a night from the, was that the right baseline, right?
The turnarounds?
Yeah, the turnaround from the right. I mean, to nasty. Say that became an automatic. I mean, it was, when he shot it, if it missed, we were like, what happened? What was there like a breeze in the arena or something? It was that consistent. And, you know, obviously he did not have that same consistency this season, but even when he was struggling, like, teams do pay attention when he gets the ball. You could see the defense reacting. Like, they're like, okay, we have to be on our toes here. Like, this notion that, like, anytime he got the ball, defenses were just thrilled because they're like, oh, Julius has the ball, he's going to turn the ball over, he's going to miss a shot. Like, that was not the case. Like, defenses still honored him. And that is real. And I think that will continue to be real. And I think that will get a lot better in a place like Phoenix, especially since I think a change of scenery might do him good. Look, now I'm talking myself into Julius Randle. But the other part of it that I do want to ask, because you brought up Ayton.
Yep.
Because the other part of the conversation that always comes is like, you would ideally like to give Julius some space to work that is not just 16 to 18 feet from the basket. And you'd like him to be able to take his guy inside a little bit. And I feel like that, I mean, Ayton's not like a stretch five, but he's a guy that doesn't have to exist 3 feet from the paint, which is all we have had here for the last 2 years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you know, there's ideally this version of DeAndre Ayton that becomes a real volume stretch big, and he's been practicing it, you know, little by little, but ultimately I don't anticipate DeAndre Ayton going out this season and shooting 5 threes a game. I don't think he's going to become Miles Turner, because he's already such a good finisher inside. He's one of the best rim runners in the NBA as it is. And let's be honest, he's also a better rim runner than Julius Randle is a rim runner. So if you're talking about pure 2-man pick and roll, a Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton pick and roll is going to be way more efficient than a Chris Paul, Julius Randle pick and roll.
Yes,
where I think there's some nuance that could be added specifically with Julius's addition into the offense is slipping screens. I think this is something, you know, you guys have obviously watched all the games. Like, I don't know if this was necessarily utilized all that much in the past 2 seasons, but like, I think it has to do with who your guard partners are and how much gravity they carry. But your ability, if you're paired with Devin Booker or if you're paired with Chris Paul and they're playing up in the pick and roll coverage, you can slip those screens and situate yourself comfortably into that 16 to 18 foot area. And from there, you go for the pull up 2, or you make a move on your man to the basket, or you pass out, which we know like Julius is going to thrive in those situations so much more than a guy like DeAndre Ayton, who's just looked a little bit stiff at doing that type of stuff. So to this point,
Julius loves to slip the screens. He's one of the issues here is he's not too fond of actually setting the hard screen.
Sure.
But to your point, and like, I'm sure people listening to this is like, well, now we have Jalen Brunson here. So, you know, Julius will finally have that guard partner to do that. A little bit different. Like in the sense that I think Brunson teams will still continue to go under in a way that I guess like Booker is not the high volume 3-point shooter that I feel like his reputation says that he is.
Totally.
Same thing with Chris Paul. Like we know where those guys want to shoot from, but at the same time, I also feel like they're going to strike a little bit more fear than Jalen Brunson as of right now, when they have the ball out there on the perimeter.
I mean, look, Devin Booker's not a high volume 3-point guy, but first of all, you do know he can go off, and he has had games with 7, 8, 9 threes in his career. But yes, the bigger thing is, are you going to be emboldened as a defense to start sending traps at Devin Booker if you know the alternative is he pitches it into DeAndre Ayton from 18 feet out and the guy won't dribble? The guy just wants to rise over and take those mid-range jumpers. And hey, DeAndre Ayton has a pretty mid-range jumper, but a guy who actually has the audacity to play some ugly basketball and take some tough shots could add an element of dynamicism and versatility to the Suns offense that they're really lacking right now. And that's kind of what we're looking at with Julius.
I love this. I love the direction we're heading. I'm still a little bit worried for you guys. Why am I worried for Suns fans? Like, Jesus Christ, you guys won 64 games.
There's a kinship. You talked about this last year on your episode with Mike, actually, that the two franchises have shared a lot of weird similarities.
Even this summer with there was a star that
lost out. Yep.
Wanted to be in each of these respective places, and it didn't get done. I think off the ball, I think there's always going to be a question of what is Julius doing when he doesn't have the ball? And that's a real question. I do have to think that if he was on a team with Chris Paul, that whatever element of his game could be in existence would exist. And also, I don't think he's as bad of a 3-point shooter as he was last year. I forget, what was he, 31% last year after
he was, this is the thing that is going to make or break for me of get me run out of town. If the difference between being a 41% above the break shooter 2 years ago and a 31% guy last year, it's a 10% difference. I mean, if he shot that again, then this is a horrible move. I acknowledge that. I would be willing to own that.
I think look, I know empty gyms. I've made the point about the empty gyms. I get it. I think can get to the point where 35, 36%. Now, again, you guys don't care about winning 55 or 60 regular season games. You guys care about the last 5 minutes of game, 5 against the Mavs or Nuggets or Clippers or something. In that situation, is anyone guarding Julius? Probably not. So that part of it is a little dicey. And then on the other end of the floor, this man received an all defense vote.
From who, ago. By the way?
I don't think I ever.
I would expect you guys to know. Don't they publish it? Isn't it public?
It is public. Wait, no, Andrew, chime in here. Is the all defense voters not published?
I'm not 100% sure. While you guys discuss Julius Randle's defensive merits, I will look it up to try and find it.
Anyway, I remember the day that I looked up and I saw he got that vote, and I was like, you know what? Good for him. He earned it, because there were nights where I guess I'll say he was almost a tone setter because of how bad he had been at times on that end of the court, not only his first year with the Knicks, but throughout his career at times, where you could just tell he was locked in and he wanted to set the example. And he's also quite good when he's on his game, when he's out on the perimeter. And he has he's matched up with a guard. He could hold his own in those situations. It's the off ball awareness stuff, and it's the complete and total lack of rim protection at times. That's another thing where it's an issue. But I think he'd try if he got traded to you guys. I'll say that.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to ask you, because that's all I'm looking for, man. I was looking at some of the stats offered by B-Ball Index. I don't know if you guys have a subscription with them, but just a lot of the effort stuff is concerning. He runs less on defense than other players. We're in an era of NBA statistical tracking data now where, first of all, I see you if you're not moving your feet, right? But also I can pull up that number that says you are not moving your feet as much as the next guy on the roster. Julius ranked out last year as one of the worst in terms of just defensive miles covered. That's concerning. I mean, part of it is scheme, but it's still concerning. He ranked out as one of the worst players in the league in deflections, not getting his hand on the ball, not being disruptive. Part of it is scheme, part of it is effort, and the effort part is concerning. So, look, I've never had this conversation with you specifically. I've had this conversation with other Knicks fans who have assured me in the past, when Julius is locked in, he can put in that effort. He's got all the tools. He can be a solid defensive player. But I don't know how you feel what motivates him? Is it just going to be, is he going to come to a playoff team and really be motivated by the pursuit of winning a championship, or is he not? Is that not, his motivation?
I think that's God. We're talking about Julius Randle's motivations.
I need to know if I'm going to commit Landry Shaman and a protected pick, such vaunted assets. I need to know.
Here's what I think I know. I think I know that Julius Randle really enjoyed being the face of arguably the most beloved Knicks team of the last 20 years. I think he really liked that. I think that was really meaningful to him. And I think he really loved the fact that it was on his back. You know what I mean? And I don't think he loved the fact that they tried to adjust a formula that I'm sure in his mind he felt worked pretty well in the 2020-21 season by bringing in Kemba Walker and bringing in Evan Fournier and basically telling Julius, like, look, you have to adjust how you play. And I think to his credit, he like kind of tried to do that, but also when you were watching it, you're like, he doesn't want to do this. Now, Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier are very different than Chris Paul and Devin Booker, to put it politely. So that's the thing about it. And like, if he really believed, like, if I go out and I play a certain way, I can win a championship. Like, I do think that would matter to him. Like, but I feel like I would say that about most NBA players. Like, why would it not matter to him?
You would hope. You would hope it's the case about basically any guy in the league. But, you know, I mean, the truth is that's just not the world we live in. And also, I mean, with Randle, there have just been concerns after. Look, I read what comes out of the New York media, and over the past year, you know, it's not been pretty. And I'm not going to say that there's been a campaign against the guy or anything. I'm sure you have some listeners, or there are some Randle truthers. The factions always exist who believe that, right? I'm not going to say that people are out to get him. But yeah, it's been tough seeing kind of all of the accusations over effort, because when you come to me with that aspect of it specifically, I don't know that I can defend that. I can't.
There is no defending it. I think there are people who are like, look, it was a season from hell for him. Give him a chance to redeem himself. And I would be more on board with that. And I kind of earlier in the offseason was a little bit more on board with that, until now I'm just looking at it and I'm like, I just don't know if it's worth the risk. Well, but what's the best?
I've heard you bring up the point, but like, what's the best case scenario, right? You bring Randle back, he has another great season, and you finish as a 6th seed, and then what? Like, that's.
I mean, look, let me just be clear. If he comes back for the Knicks, if the Knicks don't trade him, which again I've waffled on this point. I think as of now, if you were to ask me, are they going to trade him? I'd probably say no. I hope I'm wrong. If he starts a season and he's playing well and he's shooting the ball well and like he's into it and he's trying hard, like, I think there's a lot more upside presented by that than downside. At the same time, what I don't have faith in ultimately is like the team looking at that as an opportunity to sell high. I think the team would look at that as an opportunity to be like, oh, okay, now he's more resembling the guy we saw 2 years ago. We just went out and got Jalen Brunson, who I think is going to do great here. I don't have to tell you about Jalen Brunson. Although I guess his series against you was like fine. It wasn't
his series against us was fine. But just to speak on it personally, like to prove myself that I'm not an Knicks hater or anything. I mean, I like the signing too. I like the offseason you guys have had. Other than that, I think there's a little bit of a logjam that needs clearing, and that's why I'm here today. Yeah, but Jalen Brunson, I mean, so much was made of, oh, he's overpaid. It's too much. He's going to be like the 50th or 60th highest paid contract in the league. It's a good deal. I like it.
I'm very happy with him. He's going to be good. RJ, I'm known as an RJ hater. I think RJ is going to be very good. I hope he's great someday. And I think he's definitely going to be better next year. So it's like, I could see them getting to a place where they're like, where they talk themselves into like, okay, let's take this kind of like they were a year ago, right? Where it's like, let's take this a step further. We've added Brunson, who's a legit piece of the mix. Barrett's better. Like, we believe in Grimes. We believe in this. And then, where does that leave Obi? Now, where I'm not is I'm not one of these people who just think like, well, Obi Toppin is so good that we need to trade Julius Randle to just get him minutes. And that's the only reason. I think that's part of the conversation. Because the fact is like, and, Zach Lowe and Ian Begley just had a great pod about this a couple of days ago, where it's like he was the 8th pick in the draft 2 years ago. If Julius stays, like they talked about, like Zach tried to come up with a scenario where, Obi still finds 25 minutes a game. Like, I'll believe it when I see it. I think you're so you're so not using that asset very well in terms of Obi. But that's one part of it. I don't know. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they move him. I do, before we get done, I do want to bring up, like I said, I was going to the Bogdanovic thing.
Before you do, can I close the loop on the Julius Randle all defense voting?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Throw them under the bus.
So there is no record of who voted for what. They do have the totals though. Julius Randle didn't receive a all defense vote. He received 2. He received 4.
Oh, did he really?
He received 4 points for second team all defense. Yes.
Wow.
He received.
How many people vote on that? Like 100? Is it like a clean 100?
Yeah. Something like that. Yeah. The point being, and look, I'll just throw my 2 cents in here, Sam. There's a Laker game at the end of that season, that 2021 season, where the Knicks lost in overtime. Julius had 31. Like Julius had 31, 8 and 5, but like nobody on the floor was efficient. There's 2 players in double figures. RJ went like 2 of 15 that night. Game. And Julius was arguably the best player on the floor that had a healthy Anthony Davis on it. And there was like a free throw that he made at the moment he made it. He sprinted back because AD was camping under the court. And this was like a sign that Knicks fans, like he was our guy, which is why last season was so disappointing. It's less about that, like his efficiency went down and he regressed from an unreal season that he had. It's that we thought we had star 1 and now we're looking for star 2 and he regressed to like not a star. Yeah. So that's why it's been more frustrating. It's why we're having you and other potential leaders on the pod right now to find him.
No, I totally understand the disappointment, but like his defense was good though.
Yes.
In that game.
His defense, the defense was real. I mean, and again
Anthony Davis on the floor, and he was arguably the best player on both ends. Yeah.
I bet I could track down just that possession. I'll look for it.
It's like, I know they got beat by the Hawks in 5 games and Julius played abominably on offense in that series. Like their defensive rating in that series was like, they did a good job against a really good offensive Hawks team. And like, so even in the playoffs, the defense held up. I don't know. We'll say, the bogey thing. So there's a report from a guy in your neck of the woods. I told you I was going to refer to him as Gambo.
John Gambadoro. See, I screwed up because you screwed up.
Yeah, we both did. So that the Suns, and I think this may have been out there from someone else, that the Suns are looking at, I always screw this one up too. Bojan, right? It's Bojan
Bogdanovic.
Yeah, Bojan Bogdanovic. Bogdan is on the Hawks. So Bojan Bogdanovic, Suns are interested. I think there was something, Woj may have gone on TV the other day and said something like Utah might be looking for two firsts for Bojan, which is good luck with that.
Ambitious.
Yes. And the Knicks were also mentioned as a team by Gambo, as a team who was kicking the tires. Now, the notion of the Knicks re-engaging the Jazz in trade discussions over anything is like, I don't know if I buy that one, putting aside the notion of the Knicks trying to go out and get a veteran player. But yeah, like Bojan's like kind of a 3-4. So it does seem to me clear that you guys are making an effort here to upgrade the position, right?
Yeah, I mean, Bojan's fine. I would take it over nothing, right? But like, there's just a clear difference in what I'm talking about that, again, that upper bound and self-creation. I will say I've been watching Croatia's games at Eurobasket. I don't know how intently you're following Evan Fournier in his forays with Team France.
I just know Luka put up 47 the other night.
He put up 47 on them, but they'll be in the knockout stage. They'll be fine. But like for our part, I've been watching a lot of Dario Saric tape because he's coming back. I'm interested. What's he going to do? He hasn't played basketball in 12 months. The real star of Team Croatia has been Bojan Bogdanovic. I think he has 54 points in their past 2 games. He's running a lot of pick and roll because they don't really have a point guard. And he's taken onto his shoulders a lot of those creation responsibilities. And that's Eurobasket. It's not the NBA, but he looks good. So I would say whether it's for the Knicks or the Suns, 2 first-round picks is ridiculous. Let's get that out of the way. But Bojan Bogdanovic, I think his offensive capabilities are unquestioned. I mean, he averaged almost 20 points per game last season. and he's legit. He's not Julius Randle, though. Even at his best, he's not Julius Randle. And that's kind of my central point. That's why he's not option number one.
Listen, man, I really do. I mean this. I think Julius could go there and be really successful. And even if he does go there and is really successful and looks great and helps the Suns, I don't know, get to another finals or something, I think there is a world where it is a win for both teams and not just the Suns.
Well, let's to return kind of back to the tangible trade packages we were talking about at the beginning. I feel like I didn't really gauge exactly how you feel about the guys we were talking about, the pieces. We talked a little bit about Jae Crowder with minutes distribution. And if this were a normal world, by the way, and you had a normal coach, I would say it should be easy to convince Jae Crowder to just play 25 minutes. Like, he doesn't have to. There's no reason that Jae Crowder has to come in and play 37 minutes, but like in a Tibbs world, he might. If it were me, he would play like 27 and he should be happy with that and accept a mid-level contract next year. You know what I mean? But I understand how that could be difficult.
And you had a normal coach is a hilarious line, Sam. Yeah. Thank you for that. Especially who you're talking to right now.
He's just doing what he's paid to do.
Yes.
Try to win ball games. That's it. That's all it comes out to.
45 minutes of Jae Crowder is the best way to win ball games.
You're right.
34.
34. Yes. Totally.
Crowder, Shamet, and Craig. I think that's the package.
That's the package.
I think that's the package. It's 3 for 1. Maybe the Knicks send Deuce and they get a protected first back.
I would send you guys a protected, like top 10 protected 2025 or something.
Well, you guys still own all of your picks, right? So
we have all of our picks. I mean, I would think you'd be more interested in the ones a couple years from now because
I'm sure they would too.
There's a real implosion potential that I think you would be interested in. You don't want a 2023 pick, I would think, but
no. Especially since they already have a top 10 protected from Dallas next year, that is almost certainly going to convey. I would do that trade, but I think if they got a first, I think they'd do it. I really do. I think if they got a first from Phoenix, even if it was more heavily protected, I think they would do it. That's I don't have any information to say definitively that, but that would be my assumption.
And then what's the long-term, like, of those guys you're getting there? Is it just pure cap relief, or would there be any way forward? Like, could you see Jae Crowder in a Knicks uniform? You'd have to re-sign him, but could you see him there for a few years or something?
I think Crowder would play minutes, and I think the hope would be they'd flip Crowder, before the deadline. To your point, I think there is a world, famous last words, where like Obi would start, but Crowder would come off the bench and play. Like, he basically split minutes with Toppin. Yep. I could see that world. Shamet, I don't think would play.
I mean, what I will say for Shamet is, like, you have a lot of guards, I will be honest, but at least he's an off-ball guard, right? You can run him around screens. You can kind of get him some motion in the offense. He's not the type of guy who's taking a ton of touches away from people, but sort of just injecting some gravity, which, if you're trying to win ball games, isn't the worst thing. But I don't think he'd play a ton either.
Yeah, I don't see how it would fit. Which is like, I don't know if the Knicks would love that, but and then Craig would just, I think, be salary filler. And they do have roster spots. I'll say that. So they could accommodate this trade. This was fun. I feel much better about this than any previous one of these sorts of conversations that we've had.
I feel good. I feel good too. I think I feel like I can't call shots because I don't know exactly how you guys feel. I don't know exactly how your fan base feels. I feel like you guys are on board mostly with this. It's always hard to get people to agree to trades. Like, when you're like, I'm going to get crucified for this. I'm going to get mauled when I retweet this on my feed. But, I've assumed the enemy brand at this point, and you got to do what you got to do. Change got to come. So it's been fun.
Before you get out of here, tell the folks at home where they could find you and your stuff.
Yeah. S Cooper Hoops on Twitter. That's where you'll find most of my stuff. Just if you're interested in Suns talk or general NBA musings. And then we're on the BlueWire podcast network as well. We're the Suns Pod, the Timeline, Phoenix Suns Pod. If ever you're interested in dropping in, we'd love to have your ears.
You heard it here. These guys are, again, it is really one of the best NBA local podcasts around. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep killing it. It was a pleasure having you on. Maybe if we complete this trade, we'll do a short follow-up at some point.
Be a lot of fun. Appreciate it again for having me on.